We're so excited for you guys to tune in to today's episode, our interview with Dr. Jaime Seeman, aka Dr. Fit and Fabulous. Dr. Seeman is a board-certified obstetrician and gynecologist practicing in Omaha, Nebraska. She is fellowship trained in integrative medicine and board-certified ketogenic nutrition specialist. In addition to her medical career, Dr. Seeman was Miss Nebraska in 2020, appeared in NBC's Titan Games, and is co-owner of Upgrade PI. She inspires hundreds of thousands of people on her social media channels, Dr. Fit and Fabulous, and her podcast, Fit and Fabulous Podcast. She is married to Ben, a former police sergeant, and they have 3 young daughters for whom they work every single day to exemplify the hard-to-kill lifestyle.
All right. Well, Dr. Jaime Seeman, welcome to the show.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited. So we always like to kick off with our guests with a game of true and false, but it's true and false, and you can add a caveat if you believe there is one. All right?
Okay. All right.
So let's go right into it. So number 1, women's thyroid issues can only be addressed with medication.
False.
Cool. Number 2, men can be as responsible for infertility as women.
True.
Number 3, plant-based diets are ideal for women trying to conceive.
False. The only caveat I will put there is it's possible with very titrated, massive supplementation.
Okay.
Very good.
Next is heavy weights should be avoided if a woman's goal is to tone up.
False.
All right. Number 5, protein plays a vital role in women's health.
Absolutely true.
Being in ketosis can be beneficial for people in the face of the 2020 vid.
True.
Number 7, blondes have more fun.
Well, there's a lot of caveats there. I'm a natural brunette, but I've been a blonde, a fake blonde most of my adult life. So I mean, I'll go yes with an asterisk.
So much in common.
Yes.
And then finally, a strong woman is hard to kill.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Awesome.
Excellent. All right. Well, why don't we just kick off right there with that last one? You wrote a book called Hard to Kill, and we wanted to know a little bit more about how you came up with that concept. You know, what is the basis of it?
We all go through phases of our life, and a lot of the way that we perceive the world is through the lenses in which we've had experiences. So, you know, as I went through my life, I was a collegiate athlete. I went to medical school, I had 3 pregnancies. I got to a point in my life where I was living with preventable medical conditions. From the outside world, you know, it looked like I probably had a great life. I was married, had 3 kids. I was a doctor, right? I had a degree in nutrition and exercise science, a medical degree. I should have like all the knowledge in the world. And here I was struggling with all the things that I was trying to treat in patients. And I felt like almost like a fraud. I mean, I hate using that word, but I really felt, you know, like it just wasn't authentic. You know, how am I supposed to sit here in a clinic and tell people, you know, what to do if I can't even do it for myself? Because I think as doctors, we acknowledge all the time how hard behavior change is, right? But on a very personal level, at that time in my life, I went through a horrible tragedy. I lost one of my best friends, and I really had a face-to-face conversation with my own mortality. And the fact that day in and day out, we generally really take each day for granted. We just do. And it's hard sometimes to realize how precious each day is that we wake up and that we're breathing and that we get to be with our family and friends and that we get to go to our jobs and vacation and do all these amazing things, because the real fact of the matter is, you know, I deliver babies, and when I deliver babies, I don't know how long their life is going to be, right? Maybe they only get 5 years or 10 years. My friend got 29, maybe they get 100, and that's fantastic. So I had really kind of this, you know, awakening in me of really asking, like, who am I? Like, who am I and what is my purpose, you know, here on this earth? I mean, really. And it was kind of in that moment when Hard to Kill was born. I didn't know that wasn't the verbiage that I used in my brain, but really for me, it was like, hey, listen, like there is a way that I want to live my life, and there is a message that I want to leave behind when I'm not here for my 3 daughters. And that's when my brand, Dr. Fit and Fabulous, was born. And I really wanted to be accountable to the world, on my own personal journey, that doctors are patients too, and we are humans. And so I went through this evolution of getting back to the basics. Medicine is so caught up in prescriptions and procedures, and all these, technologies are incredible. But we're really missing the mark when it comes to the foundational principles of the way that we should really be living our lives. And so that's where Hard to Kill was born. My book talks about the 5 pillars that I believe we should really master before we start worrying about all these other things. I think we get into the weeds. You see it on social media a lot. And those things are the way we eat, the way we move, the way we sleep, the way we create resiliency from stress in mind, body, and spirit. And then the people, places, and things that are in our life.
So let's dive a little bit deeper on that. Let's starting with the nutrition piece, because I feel like this definitely ties into some of the earlier questions about thyroid and such. So you see women, right? The full spectrum. You see pre-pregnancy, during pregnancy, post-pregnancy, I'm sure postmenopausal. And so how do you see nutrition fitting into each one of those phases of a woman's lifespan?
Women are mammals, just like men, and mammals require nutrient sensing pathways. It is a requisite for life. So our body, through these nutrient sensing pathways, is trying to survey our environment, literally. And when it comes to nutrition, it's surveying, what is the amount of nutritional energy that's available in my environment? It's sensing the micronutrient value of the foods that we're eating. It's also sensing sunlight and so many other things that are tied into human metabolism as well. And then in women in particular, hormones are highly involved in human metabolism. So we know that there's estrogen receptors literally everywhere. They're not just in our uterus and our ovaries and our vagina and our breasts. They're in our brain, our heart, our bones. They're in the inside of our inner ear. I mean, they're literally everywhere. They're in our thyroid. So all of these things are intricately, connected. The human body is just incredibly complex and amazing. So when I think about this for women, we think about normal growth and development, right? I have 3 daughters. They're turning 8, 10, and 12. They're going through human sexual development. Their bodies are maturing and getting into a place where at one point they will be able to reproduce. I mean, that's what happens with mammalian species. So then when women get into these years of fertility, nutrition is so important, because when we think about what it takes to actually build another human being, right? There's a lot of things that are absolutely required. So the physical building blocks, which are amino acids and protein, the fats that are required to develop the baby's brain and spinal cord, and the sex steroid hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, they're literally all made from fat. So these things are really important. But when it comes to carbohydrates in these years, carbs are not inherently evil. I think when it comes to whole food carbohydrates, I tell patients this all the time, nobody got diabetes from eating too many blueberries. But carbohydrates are non-essential for human life. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't consume them. But this is a period in a woman's life when excessive consumption of simple refined carbohydrates, low quality fats, and low amounts of protein can have huge ramifications in her reproduction. And if she were to get pregnant, in her ability to grow a healthy newborn baby that's going to be able to survive for generations and generations, because it's not just that we're building this small human, we are actually sending messages to the DNA. These are called epigenetic modifications. So we're literally kind of programming, it's called fetal programming. We're fetal programming our baby, our offspring for generations to come. And that's why I've become so passionate about what I do, because I went through my own struggles. Thank God, I don't know, my children appear to be healthy, but I went through my own struggles, but this is what I do day in and day out. I want to have healthy moms and healthy babies. And it's not the norm anymore. We have skyrocketing rates of not only obesity, but preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, large babies requiring C-sections. And all of these things are not just having an impact on the moms, they're impacting the babies and these families forever. And then as when women transition into, they're done having children, they are done growing their family, they transition into what we call perimenopause. So they're getting within 5 to 10 years of a transition where they are no longer going to have their fertility. And these women start to experience a lot of the hormonal shifts that happen with loss of estrogen and progesterone production. Like I said earlier, estrogen is highly tied to human metabolism. So with erratic amounts of estrogen production, these women start to experience brain fog. They start to have problems with sexual function. They start to gain weight because loss of estrogen increases insulin resistance. And then once a woman finally goes through menopause, the complete absence of periods for 12 months, or biochemically, the ovaries are just not making estrogen and progesterone anymore and cycling. Now we're at a very just low, steady state of no hormones. And these women are really now feeling the ramifications of these loss of hormones that are tied to human metabolism. And now her risk of things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, cancer starts to increase significantly. And so this is a time in a woman's life where, depending on what she's been doing for the last 10 to 15, 20, 30 years, she's either built this great foundational health that's going to give her longevity. It's going to give her the ability to continue to vacation and play on the floor with her grandkids and live this long, wonderful life, however long she gets, on earth. But if she came into menopause with a lot of metabolic disease and a lot of problems, it gets really a lot harder to unravel those issues once a woman goes through menopause. So that's how I kind of look at it over a woman's lifespan. Different challenges at each, decade of our life, but nutrition is super important at every single step.
There are so many women listening that I'm like, they wish they had you 10, 20, 30 years ago. And I guess the biggest question I have, and then I do want to go back into the true and false, is for women that maybe are struggling with, I'm in menopause right now, I'm postmenopausal, and I have been a metabolic disaster most of my life. Do you believe that by changing habits and making nutritional changes, they could essentially reverse maybe some of what they're experiencing?
I really do. I really do. Because I see these women in my clinic, and I see the ones that are really able to stay focused on the things in which they can control, do a lot better. I think there's a mindset and a mentality that goes along with it, because we are going to age. I mean, that is one thing that we have to accept, is that we currently right now have no way to turn back the clocks, essentially. And so we have to really be grateful that, that we're still alive and that we're still here, and that aging is a normal process of the mammalian species. But I do think that, for the women who go through this transition that just feel so disconnected with themselves and what's happening with their body, I think that these principles really can get them back to a place where they feel more empowered with their ability to influence really how they feel and function.
I love that. There's a hope. I think that a lot of women do, sit in this place and they feel like there is no hope and it's not even worth it, or maybe a lot of them just say, screw it. So I love that.
And, you touched on a really important point there with regards to mindset. I mean, that plays a huge role in all this, because we can provide all the recommendations of these are the things that you need to change. But then I'm sure that you see this as well. There's a high degree of frustration, especially for a woman who is, let's just say, over 40, and she's recognized things are getting a lot more difficult. I used to be able to diet for a few weeks and drop 30 pounds, and that's no longer happening. And I guess this too ties into the question around thyroid, because we often will hear from those clients, I think there's something wrong with my thyroid. I think there's something wrong with my thyroid. And we're like, I think it's probably more tied to your behaviors. And yeah, go ahead, go get your thyroid tested. But at the end of the day, you probably have to address the things that you're doing on a daily basis. So, I mean, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I'm going to answer this in a very unique way. So I myself had hypothyroidism after my pregnancy. And, us as patients, sometimes we want there to be something wrong with us. We want there to be some crazy thing that comes out on the lab work that says, oh, yep, you're right, Jamie. You've been doing everything the right way. You've got hypothyroidism, this magical thing that you picked up at the mall, and we're going to cure it. We're going to give you this medicine and everything's going to be fine. Even medical diagnoses like hypothyroidism contribute to our internal language in our brain and kind of this almost victim mentality. So when I wrote this book called Hard to Kill is basically my internal software. So when we wake up and we get to make all these magical choices every day, how we eat, how we move, how we sleep, right? There's this internal language in our computer hardware system that drives those actions. So language inside of our brain drives actions. Actions in our life give us outcomes. Okay. We can't just make things happen, right? We just put in the action and then there's the outcome. So what happens when women are struggling and they think it's their thyroid, and sometimes they do get diagnosed with thyroid dysfunction. Okay, let's say you have hypothyroidism. Now it becomes this internal language. I have hypothyroidism. That's why I'm tired. That's why I can't wake up in the morning and go to the gym. That's why I struggle with my weight. That's why this, that, the other, right? And that's the problem sometimes with giving a patient a diagnosis is sometimes if they never change that internal language, you'll never help them get through it and get past it, because many of the things that we diagnose, like hypothyroidism, diabetes, hypertension, many of these things are completely reversible. Now, when it comes to thyroid, not all of them, but hypothyroidism related to insulin resistance, related to nutrient deficiency that's not autoimmune in nature, these things really can be improved through lifestyle modifications. And so, when it comes to the thyroid, one thing women have to understand is that any type of caloric restriction, because people will say that the ketogenic diet or low carb diets are real bad for the thyroid, any type of caloric restriction will decrease thyroid function, anything. So the thyroid's job is through these nutrient sensing pathways to say how much energy is available. So if you're only eating 1,200 calories a day, the thyroid says, well, there's not much energy. Let's turn the systems down and conserve the energy. So it turns things down. Now, let's say you're getting adequate calories, but you're not getting all the nutrients required to make thyroid hormone, convert T4 into T3, all these other processes involved in thyroid function, selenium, zinc, vitamins C and E, D, there's so many things involved, B vitamins. So if you're deficient in these things because you're getting your calories equated, but it's very nutrient poor food, right? Maybe a lot of processed foods and things like that don't have a lot of nutrients, you could also be having thyroid dysfunction, even if you're eating enough calories. So there's a lot of routes and roads to the same problem, but that's the issue sometimes with getting diagnosed with or trying to find a reason that you don't feel good, is sometimes it validates everything that they're doing.
I couldn't agree more. And I love so much that you said that. I think I've always had this internal struggle when people say, well, I have type 2 diabetes, there's nothing I can do about it. They almost become powerless in their own mind. And that, I think, to people like us that always want to push, the envelope, do better, like just up level, it's so frustrating because it's such a fixed mindset. Whereas we know if they just shifted that a little bit, like, I got this diagnosis, but I'm going to make the changes that maybe will help me overcome it. Maybe not, and I think just with opening up that mindset, I think people would give themselves so much more power than we stop ourselves at.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw you a softball. No pun intended. But you talked a moment ago about nutrients, and even if somebody is in, say, a caloric deficit, or they're not in a caloric deficit, but they're not getting nutrients. So what are the most nutrient dense foods that individuals could be eating in order to ensure that they're getting all the vitamins and minerals that are required?
The question here is, for the intake of calories, if I'm going to eat, 500 calories, and then we look at the nutrient content of the food, we know that whole foods contain probably an appropriate amount of energy, and a lot of they're co-packaged with a lot of nutrients. Okay, so I don't care if you're carnivore or vegan or somewhere in between. If you're eating real whole foods, you're getting nutrients. Now, if we dissect that diet a little bit further, looking at plant foods versus animal foods, plant foods versus animal foods are not the same. So although you can get nutrients from plants, a lot of the nutrients in plants are not in the same form as an animal food. For instance, like the vitamin A is different. The omega-3s are different that come from animals and plants, and the plant ones tend to require a conversion in the body to kind of turn into their active form. Also, plant foods come with typically other things that can block the absorption. So we're talking like phytic acid and things like that. So like, for instance, everybody thinks Popeye, the Popeye, the character, eat your spinach, right, for your iron. The bioavailability of iron in spinach is much lower than the heme iron content of eating, a steak, some ground beef, ribeye, or something like that. So even though they may contain similar nutrients, the bioavailability is much better when it comes to animal foods. And for certain nutrients, you cannot find them in plant foods. So we know that people who are on a completely, vegan, vegetarian, or even quote unquote plant-based diet, they could be deficient in B12, iron, vitamin D, choline, the list goes on, carnosine, carnitine. So there's a lot of things that plant foods cannot provide. So if you are going to just eat a whole food diet, it's important to include nutrient-dense animal foods in that diet, in my opinion, because avoiding them is definitely not optimal and would require very strategic supplementation.
So with that being said, I'm sure you with a lot of your patients that come through your clinic, and it's what we hear from women that we speak with as well. We're recommending these nutritional changes that prioritize protein first, minimizing all types of refined carbohydrates, processed foods, minimizing seed oils, all of that. And inevitably, they come back and say, but I just don't like protein, or I don't feel like I could eat enough protein. I mean, how do you navigate that? Because I know you are probably one of the few doctors who actually takes the time to educate people on nutrition and the importance. So I'm curious to hear your take.
Yeah, so protein is incredibly important because our bodies are the turnover of amino acids in our bodies. There are certain organs that turn over very rapidly. For instance, the lining of our gut and our colon, we remake that literally every couple days, maybe 5 to 10 days at most. We're literally rebuilding a whole new gut lining in 5 to 10 days. Certain organs, like we build a new liver every couple years. When you're thinking about that, like if you have a Lego castle and you literally demolish the castle, all those Lego parts went to your neighbor kid and you have to rebuild the castle, that's a lot of Lego parts, which means you have to consume them. You have to get them in your diet, okay? The only reservoir of Lego parts in your body is your muscle. So if you are a woman and you are chronically not getting in enough protein or eating sub-threshold amounts of protein, and I can explain what that means in a second, you are at risk of tapping into your lean body mass, I tell people, when you're pregnant, for instance, if you're not getting adequate amounts of protein, your body will just take your bicep to make your baby's bicep. Like the pregnancy and the placenta are team fetus.
You don't want that.
They are not team mom. Okay. That's the real issue with women who are eating protein deficient diets. Now, what is the requirement? When we look at the recommended dietary allowance of protein, in my personal opinion, it's too low. The level is set at a place to avoid disease, essentially, but that doesn't mean it's optimal. That doesn't mean that it's going to make you harder to kill, right? So I'm a huge fan of leveraging protein in the diet, not only because it gives you all these building blocks, but the other thing it does is we are struggling with hunger, but we're also obese. That doesn't make sense. If we have all this extra energy on our body, why are we always hungry? And it's because we're constantly eating sub-threshold amounts of protein. And the body, as a mammal, through these nutrient sensing pathways, will continue to tell you to go find food until you give it what it needs. And it's looking for protein. That's what it's looking for. And so when you're constantly eating 10 grams here, 15 grams here, 20 grams here, and you're never giving it the amount that it needs in that one meal, it will continue to tell you to go out into the pasture and search and hunt and find more. And it will not let you sleep. It will keep you awake until you go find those things. And so, and then it just creates this vicious cycle for us. We put on more weight, we get insulin resistant, we get hypothyroid, and then we have to undo all this damage just to get back to just the normal, we call homeostasis. The body likes homeostasis. It doesn't like big upswings and big downswings. It likes the same thing all the time, and it likes to stay right there. But gosh darn, as Americans, we just We make it work really hard.
Well, and you mentioned the threshold, or at least what's recommended, is set so that we avoid disease. Yet what we wind up doing is consuming all of these other foods that contribute to disease.
Yeah,
And
you bring up an amazing point here. When you avoid something in the diet, you replace it with something else. And so when we vilify nutrient-dense animal foods, protein, meat, people will replace it in the diet. So if you tell them to only eat red meat once a week, they will replace that with something else. And it might be, low-fat chicken with more omega-6, fats in it. It might be processed foods, more processed carbs, more grains, more sugar. The human will replace that energy from somewhere, and it's going to have less nutrients. And so we have to be careful when we say, oh, don't eat XYZ. What are we going to eat in place of it? And that's the important thing.
To that extent, let's talk a little bit more about, the role of carbohydrates in terms of women's health. I think this is, we could, this dovetails right into men's health. It's really no different, but I think that just staying with this theme of really hammering at hormones, where do you see carbohydrates fitting in? Where should they be eliminated? Is it more just a function of the types of carbohydrates?
Yeah, I think whole food carbohydrates for somebody that has insulin sensitivity and a normal body fat percentage and good lean muscle tissue is totally fine. So if you've got great lean mass, muscle is an incredible disposal agent for glucose. Then you can probably be eating real whole food carbs, sweet potatoes, blueberries, maybe you want some rice or something like that. But that's not what people are eating. And
that's like 10% of the population, by the way.
And if you're eating real whole food carbs, even then, unless you're a bodybuilder eating like 400 grams of carbs from rice per day, even if you're eating real whole food carbs, you're probably only going to get 150 to 200 at most. And by all means, that is actually kind of a low carb diet when you look at the literature. So, when we look at how many carbs could be used in a meal, even, for instance, it's probably maybe 40 grams. And if you ate that 3 times a day, that's only 120 grams. So, for somebody that has, like I said, insulin sensitivity, good lean tissue, be on a low carb diet. I think that's totally fine. For women who have low muscle mass, they're obese, they're insulin resistant, or they might be what I call, skinny fat, because there's somebody listening that's like, well, I'm not overweight. If you don't have a lot of lean tissue, your body fat's probably much higher than you assume it is, and you may have a lot of visceral fat. So in these situations, carbohydrate restriction in the diet, I think is an incredible tool, because when we take the carbohydrates out, we have to replace them with something. So we replace them with more protein and more fat. And this patient becomes more satiated. We're giving them more building blocks, more nutrients. They're able to control their hunger. The weight seems to come off a little bit more effortlessly. And as we get back to a more normal, homeostatic level, we might be able to reincorporate whole food carbs. But for, I asked Alan Aragon, he's a great nutrition researcher. I asked him who benefits from low carb diets. And he kind of said the same thing, people with insulin resistance. I was like, oh, so 88% of the country. That's the thing, is like, we're all sitting there individually listening to this talk saying like, that's not me. And we are probably in the 12%. But for the vast majority of people, this is a really good tool, because like I said, carbs are really non-essential for human life. But if you eat a low-fat diet, there is definitely ramifications. And if you eat a low-protein diet, there's definitely ramifications. As of now, we have no evidence. The Institute of Medicine has no evidence that carb restriction causes harm in any way.
At least we could say from, our personal experience, we've run the entire spectrum, especially with 13 years of bodybuilding underneath my belt, Corey Beth competing for about 3 or 4 years also. We've run the spectrum of going very high carb and low fat while still keeping protein high. We've run the spectrum of going full ketogenic. Right now, we pretty much fall into the more carnivore camp. Carnivore-ish, I'll say, because none of us is perfect when it comes to this stuff, and especially like you, we have.
And I don't think people have to be zero carb.
No.
I think there are the carnivore diet's great. I've gone through periods where I was like very strict carnivore. I'm kind of carnivore-ish. I've been that way since 2018. And I think, you know, each one of us, because we come from different DNA, will feel and function different with different modifications of the diet, you know, and you have to kind of figure that out for yourself. But if you have normal biomarkers, good lean tissue, and a normal body fat percentage, eat whatever kind of diet you want that makes that happen.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think you bring up such a valid point there too. You know, it's you being carnivore-ish, right? For 4 years now. That's like so badass, by the way. I'm only 90 days in, 3 months, you know? So like I aspire to be like you, Dr. Jamie. That said, I think, become more in tune with our body, that we sense, like, I feel like I need, like, berries are out. My kids had strawberries last night. Our kids had strawberries last night. I was like, I'm going to have 2 little strawberries, you know? And it wasn't
Totally
like,
did the same thing.
right? I'm not carnivore anymore. I mean, oh my gosh, I totally blew it. It was, I felt that way, or my monthly cycle is coming up. I know I'm probably going to be more hungry, maybe for some different things when that happens. And the beauty of that I think most people don't realize is maybe we have to go through a period of restriction, you know, to the modern mainstream person's sense, carnivore, that is so restrictive. But it helps us to become so much more intuitive and in tune with our body. And I really do believe, and I think you would too, that's everybody's goal. That's where we should be headed.
I think you know, it's okay to have dietary excursions if you know how to get back on the train.
That's good.
But the vast majority of people, and I see this even in the ketogenic world, is as soon as they have an excursion off the track, they can never get back. And the reason they can never get back is that language inside their brain about who they are. You know, I've seen people who have lost the same 100 pounds, regained it, lost the same 100 pounds, regained it multiple times in their life, right? How can they not maintain that? Like the work it takes to lose 100 pounds, right? And you gain it all back. And it's because there is a language in their brain that they are an obese person. That is who they are. I am obese. And when your brain says I am obese, your brain will and your body will do things that will make you obese. So what I kind of actually like about the carnivore diet is, for me, it's just like, you know, it's like I eat meat and eggs. So then what do? Like I eat meat and eggs. And it doesn't mean I can't say like, oh, blueberries, and eat some. But then it's like, nope, this is what I do. And so, you know, that's what keeps some people on track. And that's why some people absolutely fall off the train tracks and burst into flames.
Well, so and what you pointed to there is, you know, it's the labels, right? People label themselves. And I even find that that's the biggest issue that I take with the entire nutrition space, is that as soon as we label ourselves carnivore, we label ourselves keto or paleo or vegan, we don't give ourselves any room to listen to our body when our body's telling us, you know what, I'm kind of sensing that I need this right now. And you're like, no, I can't do that because I'm carnivore. And, you know, I was saying to Corey Beth just yesterday, I said, you know what, I'm feeling right now that I need to add a few more carbs back in. And that I know just from my training, from my performance, being a bodybuilder, looking at body composition, I don't need a lot, you know, just 30 grams a day. And I'm pretty much set, 30 to 50. And so I started adding some in yesterday. And you know what, I recognized right away, I'm okay. I'm not, you know, I might lose my carnivore card, you know, membership card, but I'm kind of okay with it.
Badge is revoked.
Yeah, but it's all good because you know what? I'm feeling better. And intuitively, you use the word exactly. Intuitively, I recognize, okay, this is what I need right now. And I love the simplicity of the carnivore diet or primal eating, because I do feel for so many people, it's like hitting that reset button, right? They're getting all the nutrients that you could possibly get while removing all of the things that are potential triggers or stumbling blocks. And then after you've established that foundation, right, you want to build yourself on a strong foundation, not on on toothpicks. But once you have that strong foundation, now you can make better decisions, so long as you did not put labels on who you are from that point forward.
I want to dive actually back into the question about, you know, being in ketosis. which basically means to everybody listening that we have the ability to use ketones or fat for fuel, could have benefit for people in the face of the 2020 vid, right? We can't say the word. I was chuckling actually at some of the comments on your posts on your Instagram, because we got to be so careful about what we say. Like, don't say the word, but we all know what we're talking about. You know, I think us, so many hundreds of people said comorbidities. Like, that's what made people extremely sick. That's what sent people to the hospital. And the mainstream was like, no, it's totally random. Could be anybody, right? Fear. Talk to us about your experience and your own personal belief or philosophy on why ketosis is so beneficial to someone that gets sick or catches the dreaded vid.
Yeah, I think it became very apparent, that we're pretty easy to kill, because, when you're metabolically broken, you're more susceptible to everything, not just diabetes, not just cancer, infections, common colds, influenza, other viruses. So, the reason that ketosis can be a tool in 2018, I always wondered, because when I kind of started this transition in 2015, 2016, my husband's allergies went away. He used to have horrible seasonal allergies. He used to constantly have to take Flonase and all of these things. And then we just kind of noticed one day that he hadn't been using his nasal spray. It was like his allergies kind of went away. I'm like, that's interesting. It's probably just because ketones are anti-inflammatory. So one of the mechanisms, everyone thinks of the ketogenic diet for weight loss, but ketones are actually a very powerful cellular signaling tool. So they go into our cells and they give messages to the rest of the cell. And one of them is anti-inflammation. So it inhibits a protein called the NLRP3 inflammasome. So they're very anti-inflammatory. So for people who have insulin resistance and they're obese and there's inflammation, right, it can help dampen the inflammation. So that's one mechanism. The other thing is in 2018, there was a study that came out showing that ketones were extremely protective against influenza through activating T cell immunity. So there are some direct stimulations within the immune system that can help your body fight a virus. And I think it's something interesting to think about, right? Like grandma's old adage, I don't know what it was, like starve a cold, fight a flu. I don't know, something like that. But when we look biblically years ago, this has been written in medical literature for hundreds and thousands of years, that fasting can help you during illness. And that's because when you fast, you go into a state of ketosis. You start oxidizing fat, you make ketone bodies, and the ketone bodies send messages within the cells to decrease inflammation, to boost the immune system, and to help protect you. So in the medical world, we've always thought that ketones were very pathologic. They were only seen in the blood of diabetics who go into ketoacidosis. They're very dangerous. They're going to kill you. But I think what we are kind of finding now is that it's an alternative fuel source for the body. It's very protective. When it comes to pregnancy, we know pregnant moms go in and out of ketosis. Babies go in and out of ketosis. And really, honestly, us adults, we go in and out of ketosis all the time. When we sleep, we fast at night. But for most of us, our main gas pedal in our car is on glucose, and we're not efficient fat burners. We don't really know how to make ketones well. We don't have the receptors in our cells to even move ketones inside the body. So that's what keto adaptation is it's teaching your body how to use those things again. And then it's the ability to have dual fuel, to be able to flip back and forth, right? So the car never runs out of gas. But in the world of illness, therapeutic ketosis is a great tool to have in your toolbox if you ever get sick. And if you're ketogenic off and on most of the time, I personally find, and my patients tell me, they don't get sick as often.
So as far as fasting is concerned, I mean, we ourselves have been fasting for probably 6 years or so already, and we are flexible with it, right?
Yes.
If we feel that there's a need to eat earlier, just like we were saying before, if you feel the need to eat carbohydrates when you haven't been, then go for it. And we kind of feel the same way about, fasting, that it really should be a sliding scale. But how do you approach that with a lot of your patients based on, the condition that they're coming in?
So intermittent fasting is a tool. And we all do it, right? Because we all sleep at night, unless you're up all night eating. We all intermittent fast for at least 8 hours, right? 7 or 8 hours, if that's how much sleep you're getting. But it is a tool, and I think it helps in a few ways if you choose to use it. One is that it creates compliance for people, because when you can only eat, when you tell a patient, okay, listen, you can only eat between 12 noon and 6 p.m. That means between 6 p.m. and 12 noon, they're like, I can't eat. So they naturally just go do other things. They make their phone calls, they do their work, they go for a walk, right? They're not thinking, they don't have to make that decision when they walk through the pantry if they should grab something or not. So I think it helps with caloric compliance. The other tool is that it helps you get into ketosis. So if you are trying to get into a ketogenic state, fasting is a great tool, because when you're in this fasted state, you're relying first, when you start fasting, on dumping glycogen. So we only store about 2,000 calories of carbs in our body, and they're stored as glycogen in the muscle and in the liver. So when you are intermittent fasting, what you are doing is dumping liver glycogen. And as you start dumping that liver glycogen, the body says, ooh, liver glycogen's getting low. And so then it starts saying, oh, okay, let's get some fat out here. We're going to need some more energy because the glycogen's getting low. Okay, so our body is always, metabolically speaking, either in a fed or fasted state, and that flips the switch for a couple of hours after a meal. It takes a couple of hours to deal with all the things that you ate before you go back into a fasted state. But what do? We like eat every 2 to 3 hours, and then eat again 2 to 3 hours later, and then eat again 2 to 3 hours later. And then we need a snack. Like, what is a snack? Who invented snacks? When we're constantly in this fed state, we never let our body, turn over to that fasted state. And so it's an incredible tool to let your body do what it's supposed to do. Just like all tools, we can misuse them, right? You can use a screwdriver as a hammer. It's not efficient, but we can misuse tools. And intermittent fasting sometimes gets misused. Sometimes people fast too much, and they're not getting what they actually need in that feeding window. They're not getting enough protein. They're not getting enough calories. They're not getting enough nutrients. They're doing it too often. Their goal is to build muscle, but they're fasting all the time. So you really have to think about it in the context of what your goals are and use it appropriately and apply it appropriately.
And do you ever recommend extended fasts for anybody, where they're going 24 to, let's say, 72 hours?
Yeah. I mean, I think metabolically speaking, once again, tools have to be used appropriately. I think there is something very spiritual and psychological to be gained from extended fasting. I've done a few multi-day fasts myself. We see this in religion. We see this with Ramadan. There is something really to be gained from fasting and withdrawal from stimuli, from social media, from sex, from food, from these things, right, that bring us, this pleasure. So I think there are things to be gained from extended fasting in that regard. From a biological perspective, there are some scientists that believe that extended fasting could have some anti-cancer benefits because it increases autophagy. It's like purging the cancer cells. I don't know that we always have autophagy happening in our bodies. Exercise stimulates autophagy. So do I think it's necessary? Maybe not. Doing extended fasting to like lose weight, you can lose weight that way. We have evidence. There was a man that fasted for like 300 something days. He lost like 200 and something pounds. Is that the optimal strategy? Probably not. There's probably, we know with weight loss that a percentage of that is always going to be lean tissue. It's very hard to lose weight and maintain lean body mass unless you keep percent of protein high and training level high. So that's the trouble with even extended fast, is you have to ask, okay, what is the goal and the purpose of fasting for 3 days or 5 days or whatever it is?
Well, first, I just want to point out to everybody that the guy who did it was right around 385 days or so that he fasted. Yep. And so what everybody needs to understand, though, in that case study, he lived in a hospital. This is nothing that anybody out there who's like, I got 200 pounds to lose, should think that is a good intervention. You definitely need to be under medical care for something like that. But what I would like to point out that we've noticed ourselves and that of clients who have done extended fast is that it does change your mentality around food. And when you're in situations where maybe food is not as accessible. I think about a client who once mentioned shortly after we had done a 60-hour fast, she was taking a flight somewhere and the plane got grounded for 3 hours and they couldn't leave. They couldn't leave the plane. And she said everybody around her was freaking out about not having food, thinking they're going to die. And here she is. She's like, I'm good. I got like, at least 6 to 8 more hours to go before I feel like I need to. And I think
that's actually right. Yeah.
That's huge.
I've thought about that too. Like when I've gone on vacations and gone hiking, like all these people are packing all these snacks in their bag. And I was like, yeah, I'm good. Like just eat when I get back. And same thing, like my life, like I'm in the operating room sometimes all day. I mean, yesterday I left the house at 5 a.m. I literally didn't get home till 9 p.m. I got stuck in the operating room. And sometimes I don't get, to eat, but like, I don't get the like crazy, angry hunger that I used to get when my life was like a lot of carbohydrates. I don't get that anymore. I'm just like,
your story is the same.
Hungry.
Yeah,
I'll eat when I get home.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like,
I was the most hangriest person, that walked the face of the earth. But
yeah,
I think a cool thing though for people to hear is, so you in that situation last night where you're stuck in the operating room, how sharp did you remain even though you did not have carbohydrates available, right? I mean, you were still able to rely on ketones to provide all that energy.
Yeah. I mean, the blood sugar stability that is gained through teaching your body how to use both fuel sources is incredible. Like the energy is just more sustained. I always joke when I'm in ketosis, I can smell colors. Like my brain just really functions. I actually have when I podcast, I use exogenous ketones. So these are exogenous ketones, because it makes my brain work so well. And yeah, I'm a surgeon, I have to deliver babies. I mean, sometimes it's life and death. Like I need to be able to perform. And I can't be having like my blood sugar going up and down and get fatigued at the nth hour. It's really been a game changer for me in all facets of my life.
I'd like to transition now to one of the questions that we have not gotten back to, but I think it's very interesting. I've heard you talk about this before, which has to do with men and infertility, because so many times we've heard as well from women, they are trying to get pregnant. They're struggling with getting pregnant, and women tend to put all the blame on themselves. They never look outside to the man as if there might be an issue there. So can you speak to that?
This is common because women carry the pregnancy. If they can't get pregnant, there's something wrong with them. And about a third of the time it is female origin. Most common cause is anovulation, so not ovulating. PCOS, obesity, insulin resistance, huge problem. About a third of the time it's men, and sperm is obviously required to make an embryo. And not only the sperm quality, but the parameters. Not only having a good sperm that's shaped the right way, that can swim in the right direction, but it has to traverse the vagina, the cervical mucus. It has to get all the way up in the tube, and then it has to get inside, the egg. Millions upon millions of sperm in one ejaculation, and one guy will figure it out, right? But when it comes to a sperm, men produce, they turn over their sperm every 24 to 48 hours. So it's constantly happening. And that's a lot, right? So you need a lot of nutrients. You need zinc, you need CoQ10, you need B vitamins. So if a man is eating a nutrient deficient diet, and he's trying to make new sperm every 24, 48 hours, that could be a huge problem. Maybe he does good one week, but not the next. So sperm is constantly changing. Just because you had a semen analysis a year ago that said it was normal doesn't mean it's normal today. Things change over time. The other thing is that we know that alcohol, obesity, poor sleep hurt testosterone levels. And we have seen a rapid decline in male testosterone levels, a rapid decline in male fertility for this reason. Testosterone is important for male reproduction, for the ability to get an erection, for the ability to make sperm. And so that's a huge problem too. The other thing is we think about endocrine disruptors for women, right? All the makeups, the lotions, the soaps, all the things, endocrine disruption, but it's true for men too. So the plastic water bottles, the plastic food packaging. I shared a study a number of months ago about, they studied a plastic vinyl sling for men as a form of male contraception. So they put this vinyl sling around the scrotum. it rendered 100% of the men in the trial infertile via two mechanisms. One, that it's the plastic, placed right next to the scrotum. But the second is that it pulled the scrotum too close to the body and it got the temperature of the testicles too warm and all the sperm died. Now, it was 100% reversible. When they removed the polyvinyl sling, all the men were able to reproduce sperm again. But this just brings up a point that, too tight of clothing, poor nutrient diets, alcohol use, low testosterone. There's a variety of reasons why fertility problems can come from men. And then a third of the time, we don't know. The sperm looks good. She seems to be ovulating. A third of the time, we just straight up can't find a reason. And my real honest opinion is that there's probably some epigenetics, some microbiome. We know that there are particular bacteria in the microbiome, like ureaplasma, that can actually kill sperm. So there's like certain bacteria, or it makes the environment in the uterus so hostile that an embryo can't implant, like particular bacteria and microbiome. So I think there's a lot of things at play here. But people need to know that it's equal problems a lot of times in infertile couples.
You brought up the makeup and the things that we're putting on our body, and I know that's also, again, that ties right into one of your pillars in Hard to Kill is cleaning up your environment. So if we could just touch on what you see as being the biggest issues. You mentioned one, plastics. But what else are we seeing, or are you seeing, that ties to this?
So there's definitely absorption through the skin. So when I talk to pregnant patients, I say, listen, your skin is your largest organ by surface area. The largest organ is actually muscle, but by surface area, it's skin. And it's very absorbent. It can absorb medicines, it can lotions, soaps, detergents, everything we put on our skin. So there is a level of absorption to the skin that we have to be aware of. Clothing, that has water repellent or moisture wicking properties, those a lot of times are chemicals that are creating those properties. So we have to kind of take that survey. But I will say that the ingestion of chemicals is probably way higher than the absorption through the skin. So that's our food. So food that is heated in plastic, bad, bad, bad. Food that water bottles that we drink out of that, are left in the car, the plastic water bottles, heat helps those things leach out even further. As I was kind of writing my book and digging through these things, there were so many things that I was like mind blown about. For instance, BPA is found in thermal paper. So the old airplane tickets that now it's great because we can have our airplane ticket on our phone, but the old paper tickets, the thermal receipts that they would print at the grocery store, those things were loaded with BPA. And then of course, in the viral world, we got obsessed with hand sanitizer, and hand sanitizer, alcohol, makes the absorption of the chemicals on your hands, not just BPA, but all chemicals in general, tenfold. So if you have chemicals, maybe you just put on some Bath and Body Works lotion, or you just touched the thermal receipts or whatever it is, right? Like you put that alcohol hand sanitizer on, or it'll help absorb those chemicals tenfold. So these are just things that we don't think about when it comes to our health, right? We think about eating and moving and these types of things, but they can have an impact. So if you're really struggling, look at the things you're using, try to find cleaner products. There's an app called EWG. There's another one called Think Dirty. There's a lot out there. And you can try to find cleaner products. I see a lot of people in the carnivore world using like beef tallow on their skin. I've got some. I put it on my daughter's eczema the other night. It like healed it up great. So there's so many great natural products out there. You just have to search a little harder for them. But the more you can kind of clean up your life, clean up your environment, clean up the people in your life, it does contribute to your health.
I love the people part. Wait, hold on. I want to hang out on the hand sanitizer thing for a minute, because I think that this is a harsh truth for a lot of people. I mean, I think the last 3 years, people have thought it's like totally cool to bathe in hand sanitizer, right? Like, and I always say, and my kids know, I'm like, do not put that on your skin. I mean, I'm crunchy neurotic, I'm like soap and water, soap and water, soap and water. But I do think that sometimes we have to have that harsh truth. So for those that are listening, like, take this, like, you don't have to go overhaul your life today or tomorrow. But if you're a chronic hand sanitizer user, like, guess what your grandparents used? Soap and water. That's all they had. Yeah. And it worked.
Yeah. I mean, and for little kids, like, our immune systems are built through surveying our environment. So, like, I've never seen a mom put alcohol hand sanitizer on her nipple before she feeds her baby. Right. Kids are meant to eat a little dirt. We're meant to get bacteria on us, and we have it in us, and we have viruses in us, and we're supposed to live in this symbiotic world with bacteria and viruses. And just like I said, with tools, they can be misused and they can be overused and they can hurt your microbiome. And so if your hands are visibly soiled, wash them with soap and water. I really honestly would try to avoid alcohol hand sanitizer unless there is a very specific reason that you're far from water and you need it done and whatever it is. But yeah, it's a big deal.
So what you're saying is that we shouldn't live in a bubble with a mask on, locked inside our houses.
Of plexiglass.
Yes.
Those were your words, but
I don't mind putting
yeah,
my
it's a
words
crazy
out there.
world. I have to I have to be careful what I say. They'll
Yes.
take my medical license. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, yes, do the foundational things to take care of yourself and you will be less susceptible to these types of things.
I want to go back to microbiome. I mean, that to me was so apparent back in my 35-pound weight loss, which I've now kept off for 13 years, 2 healthy pregnancies, coming from the medical field. What do you wish more people knew about the microbiome?
This is such a new area. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. We don't know what the perfect microbiome is. We know that there are good guys and bad guys. Probiotics are probably oversold. The bacteria in and around our bodies should be either fed or fought through lifestyle. So through the foods that we eat, through how much sunlight we're getting, how we're sleeping. But we eat such crappy foods and we're exposed to all these chemicals and we don't sleep and we use a lot of alcohol and we don't exercise. And so then our microbiome, not just in our gut, but the microbiome in our vagina, we have a microbiome literally everywhere, by the way, you guys. There's nothing sterile in your body. There's no like the surgery isn't even sterile. Okay. There's bacteria everywhere. But I think that, like I said, we are supposed to live in this symbiotic way with bacteria and viruses. And if you do the basic foundational things, it really should sort itself out. I think we're trying to biohack it way too much. And we know over the lifespan it changes. So when we look at when they mapped the human genome, that's actually when we found out so much about the human microbiome. And when you compare babies to people in middle age to older people, it tends to change as we age, because as we age, the pH of our stomach changes, just other, things in human metabolism and physiology change, and our microbiome kind of changes with it. So there's so much that we have yet to learn about the microbiome, but take care of your body and it really should take care of itself.
I love that. Well, I think for all the people out there with their bifidobacterium and their acidophilus, it's like you don't need all the digestive probiotics. I mean, there's thousands of other strains, and that really is where I was led really through our gyms and our fitness studios, as being like, how else can we help serotonin production? How else can we reduce inflammation and not just always be concerned about the 2 that everybody knows about?
Well, yeah. And I'm telling you, fecal transplants are coming. And there are actually some studies on vaginal microbiome transplants as well. Yeah. For people with chronic vaginitis, possibly infertility. Like I said, there are particular bacteria that can render people infertile. So well, there's so much to be learned about the microbiome. But what I've found in medicine is, I cuss a lot in my real life, you guys, but you can't F with nature. Okay. You just can't F with nature. Medicine is so great, but we try all these things because we think we can do it better. And at the end of the day, you can't F with nature. It's going to figure itself out. There's always a trade-off.
Absolutely.
So.
And that's why, again, just the simplicity of eating as close to a whole food diet as you could eat, resistance training somewhat regularly, at least 2 times a week, maybe upwards of 4 at most. All of these things that we know, they're so simple in nature. It's a very simple solution. I think people make things harder than they are. I often say it's like the answer is simple, doing it is hard. And that's where, we struggle because everybody is looking for, well, what can I take? Or what else can I do other than the simple but hard thing that you just need to do consistently?
Well, and it's like I said, when I say like don't F with nature. So what did we do? We created like industrial agriculture, and then we invented cars, and we have houses, and I mean, you can literally Uber Eats from your phone. I mean, we have made it so simple to be unhealthy, and so simple to not do the things we're supposed to do. And so it is so true. It's just like there's so much to be gained from doing hard things. And these days, being healthy is hard. But there's so much to be gained, and really nothing is ever easy. That's the real truth. You just have to get better at hard.
I love that so much. And on that, we have made it incredibly simple to be unhealthy. You, on the other hand, want to help people be harder to kill. And of course, we're going to link to, your Instagram and everything else in the comments below in the show notes. But tell us where we can find your book, and you have an event coming up. So please tell our listeners about it.
Yeah. So I'm most active on Instagram, but you can find me on all the social channels. Dr. Fit and Fabulous. I've got a website, drfitandfabulous.com, where you can find links to the book and lots of other things. And then we've got Hard to Kill Summit coming up July 28th and 29th in Omaha, Nebraska. We're going to have some incredible speakers talking about all things, lifestyle and things that make you harder to kill. I feel like it's self-explanatory, but just on a mission to help a lot of people. I can only see so many patients in a clinic per day. And so my goal is to just really inspire people to do it for themselves, because our medical system is not coming to save you. You have to figure it out for yourself. And then once you do, you have to teach your family and friends. This has to start at home with the family unit, fixing these problems. That is the only solution to our healthcare crisis.
Well, we 100,000% agree. And, we just want to say that you started off this podcast by saying, doctors are patients too. And we just want to commend you for being a great doctor, but also a great patient, because I think that's partially what makes you a great doctor. So we appreciate you. And we're sure that the entire audience gained a lot from this conversation today. So thank you so much.
I really appreciate the opportunity, you guys.